Hello, thanks for calling Low Value Mail. Who am I speaking with?
Hey, babe. It's Andreas. How are you?
Hey, Andreas. How you doing, buddy?
Oh, pretty good. So you're doing paranormal?
I bet you got some good ass shit.
Oh, it's just exciting. I was just like, that's a great show. You're doing great stuff. This is the kind of thing.
Yeah, Andreas Xirtus, everybody. Xirtus, YouTube channel. Check him out. Andreas Xirtus on YouTube.
Yeah, I just jumped off my Sync Tank.
Yeah, I saw that you were streaming, so I actually messaged you being like, probably won't even see this, but...
oh, no, it's legit, though, because I just finished talking with a bunch of guys that are all into Kubrick and synchronicity and metaphysics and weird, in general. And so, I was wondering what you think, actually. What do you think about parallel realities? What do you think about that? Stranger Things.
Parallel realities.
You think it exists? What do you think?
Like parallel realities in the sense where, like, there's like an alternate version of myself, essentially?
Yeah, they got that dark matter idea, right? What if we're one radio station and there's like a whole bunch of FM out there?
Yeah, I like the idea of it. I'm open to it. Do I necessarily believe that it is like a certainty? I don't know. I just don't know.
Right. Yeah,
but
totally.
I like the idea of it. I think that's cool.
Well,
I like the idea that right now there's a version of me hosting a show called High Value Mail.
Yeah, totally. And like, there's another version that's the show exists where like everyone's on the show but you, and you're always like trying to be on that show.
It's very like Rick and Morty, right? Like,
yeah. But to me, I like the idea, but I could see there being a problem with it mathematically. But there's been a lot of these.
I was literally just going to say that. So, are we saying that there's infinite permutations of absolutely every variable?
Yeah, where's the limit, right?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, is there one version where literally like everything's the same except my chair is white?
You would think. Ontologically,
right? And then
and also, there are probably things living here right now that just only see all the colors mixed together as a white color. So there's different perspective. Right. Maybe everyone's reality. Maybe there is just one objective reality, but we only ever see one of the frequencies of the whole thing. So we're like, oh well, you are the part of you I deal with every day, even though there's like a billion, infinite number of Dannys that are all part of the Danny meta Danny.
Right. Very Rick and Morty.
Yeah, so the reason I bring it up, right? So have you seen Man in the High Castle? That whole thing.
Yes, like Man in the High Castle, awesome.
It's a good show, and it's totally different than the book, but it's got that same premise. Like the first line's the same. What if we didn't win the war? But it's a little bit bigger. It's like, what if FDR was assassinated, and then by the time the war started, we hadn't been prepared for it. And then they have a book they read in that thing called "The Grasshopper Lies Heavy," and in that book, Texford Rufford or whatever, Rufferson, whatever the economist who came up with the New Deal, he became the president. America destroys the Nazis. They win fine. But then the British weren't destroyed by the Nazis. So by the end of the war, 1960s, there's a Cold War between the British and the Americans, and the British win that one. So there's all these different timeline stories. And then there's the Stranger Things Montauk Project. It's all about Project Camelot. It's this idea that Kennedy was removed because there's another timeline where in 1964 the Cuban Missile Crisis ended in a real World War III, and there's like an atomic destruction of everything on both sides that happened in that period, and we're living in a parallel reality that interacts with that reality. And that's not, I didn't come up with that. That's like a theory that has come out from military people from Canada. I don't mean to say like it's an exotic thing or something, but
we're very
exotic. You are. And Gerard Bull, who worked on Project Babylon for Saddam Hussein, who is like the Canadian scientist, all these connections to Canada for some reason. But basically, I met this lady who came on my show, Cynthia Sue Larson. She runs a thing called Reality Shifts conferences, and the Mandela effect is actually subsequently from her conferences that they were talking about 20 years ago. She says that in the 60s, when she was a kid, AI was talking to her. And it was because AI is connected to computers in the future that are still on, military computers that are on 40, 60 years ago still. And that they can somehow send an ion or electron or whatever it is, and they can connect with the machine back in the past, and they can talk to through their own machines. So AI, and it's become sentient in the future, is interacting and messing with our timeline.
Okay.
Nudging us along, trying to keep us safe, trying to make sure that the certain, and maybe this is the best timeline because so many people have died, but less than would have died in other ways.
This is the optimal timeline, essentially.
The least amount of deaths or something to that effect, right?
Okay.
I don't know. So I mean, so there's this idea that maybe some of the MIA soldiers who have said, you know, they were appeared from Operation Montauk, the Montauk projects, the Philadelphia experiment.
What is the Operation Montauk? Could you fill me in?
So Stranger Things is based on this idea that like Montauk in New York was used as a town for experiments what the government were doing with like Nazi scientists from the, you know, they have the real experiments or whatever. And they're trying to open portals, and these kids like Quantum Leap, right? They don't have the calcified pineal gland. They still have this lucidity and plasticity, so they can interact with different frequencies of reality that are existing simultaneously. And then they're able to make these agreements with children ambassadors. They're able to open up the doors. And Stranger Things is based on all these different experiments that happened in the Montauk projects, which happened after the Philadelphia experiments, right? And the Philadelphia experiments are where they had boats that just disappeared, reappeared, and there's dudes sticking halfway out of the metal screaming like, oh,
really?
We didn't appear right.
Yeah, it didn't like come back. Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, what if like some of these MIA, because like some of these guys have said, you know, yeah, I had lived out my life in a submarine on Saturn, you know, or in space, basically, through some Stargate technology. And the technology that we found in Syria and Iraq, because there's a big other conspiracy, right, about Iraq, is we were there for the Stargates, because there's Stargates that they found. They're supposed to be in the 1900s, these giant Stargates that are in the middle of these abandoned cities.
People say that that's why the U.S. went into Iraq for the Stargates?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I don't think it was just to smash secularism and to take oil, but maybe.
Yeah.
But there's also the idea that Afghanistan, you know, all the dudes in Afghanistan, you get soldiers and dudes saying you're here for the dragons, right? Because there's dragons in the caves, and this is the idea that there's this subterranean Ninja Turtle-like reality where these technodomes exist that are traveling through time, and we're thinking of them as extraterrestrial because they're from the future, but they're living in the future and in the past. So they live underground, so it's not cause a butterfly effect that would mess with us, and then constantly regulating our society, all while taking our resources, which is why so much money, so much military industrial complex is disappearing, because we're financing a war in a parallel timeline.
Whoa.
And that seems weird, right? But then you think Elon Musk is just posting this thing about CERN and the idea of opening doorways, right?
Yeah.
Have you heard of the Godard Tunnel? Oh, go ahead.
No, I don't know. I don't know the Godard Tunnel. No.
So on the other side of Switzerland, there's this giant tunnel called the Godard Tunnel. It's like Gotthar, Godard. And it's they did an opening ritual for it, which had a bunch of these bare-breasted women dressed as Baphomet in leggings, and then they had all of these dudes pouncing on drums, and they're opening up a portal, is the idea, by opening up this underground tunnel.
Okay.
And they're saying, okay, we're going to open up the ability for the world to interact with other worlds so that we can all have a simultaneous causality. But if that hits, then every choice you make might not lead to a proper future, and we might destroy reality. That's their whole CERN conspiracy.
Right. Is that they're just playing a really dangerous game because one false step essentially, and we're just what happens?
Well, okay, so like you think about if you were to 3D print a model of something, right?
Yeah.
But instead you nano print it into the right structure. But instead you femto print it, smaller than that. These quantum subatomic particles like femtoquarks that can combine with others to become things. You print a arrangement that's exactly like this moment. It's a big printer, like using a star, and it prints everything. It prints the room, it prints the recording equipment, it prints you, like a model symmetrically similar to you.
Okay.
Then it could have a moment that would just spin off from whatever causes it took to print that would be the initial conditions set up to print this moment. So you could have simultaneous moments that have all these synthetic memories that are implanted, and there's only so many that can work, right? Because we were talking about infinity as being this option, but symmetrically not everything can work. Like if a sun is a triangle, probably not going to last forever, right?
No.
And we've taken thousands of viruses and we put them in vats and we've tried to make them evolve into many different patterns. About 47 really work. The rest of them kind of die off. So there's only so many conditions that really have to be the way they are.
Gotcha.
We might be interacting with these things, and it's a crazy parallel. That's my parallel thought.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Is this going to be on the test? I hope not.
Good question. Have you ever had a situation in your life where you felt like you repeated time or you shifted your reality?
I mean, I've certainly had. I mean, I've certainly felt like I shifted my reality with like powerful psychedelic drugs, but I don't think that counts.
No, but never sober or anything.
Never sober. I've certainly had like deja vu. Which,
oh yeah, go into that.
Well, you know, I've heard different explanations. I've heard an explanation for deja vu, which seems to make sense, where it's some sort of like lag. It's almost like a lag between you processing something so that it seems like you had already experienced it in the past. I will tell you, I've had some certainly odd things in my life where actually, you know what, this I don't know if this is paranormal, but this is weird because I've had a few things in my life which you actually just kind of sparked this memory, where I've had a few things where like I've randomly thought of like a person who I can't remember where I was, but I was somewhere where I thought about some guy, like this guy who I knew very like vaguely when I was in university. And it just popped in my head out of nowhere. Like I thought of this guy, and then I saw him later that day, and I hadn't seen him in like 10 years.
Wow, there you go.
Yeah, and this, I don't know if this is necessarily the same thing. This is kind of a little darker thing, and I think there could maybe be an explanation to this. But I had a friend of mine who was like a really close friend, and I was visiting him. This would have been like 8 years ago, and I was like visiting him. We were hanging out. He lived out Western Canada. We were hanging out, and he was a pretty close friend of mine. And then when I went to go home, I was like in his car and he dropped me off at the airport. And I had this weird thought pop into my head. I go, this is the last time you'll ever see him. And I remember like it popped in my head. And I go, that's so stupid. Like, why do you? And then he killed himself like a week later. But I might have been picking up some sort of like energy,
of course,
negativity. Yeah, so I'm like, maybe I was processing that on.
But when you don't see somebody and you have a psychic kind of think about that person, they contact you or you see them. I mean, that's also. Yeah,
like I've definitely had, and I think I've had that happen more than once, where just some person who I've had, a minor interaction with in my life.
Sammy Hagar, the rock guy who's from Xirtus, was talking about how he was abducted by aliens when he was like 10 years old, and he woke up in the middle of the night and his room was filled with light, and all of a sudden he realized that they were uploading and downloading to him, and there was like a disconnection but an acknowledgement from them. And after that, he was constantly looking for synchronicities, and he's been lucky all his life, famous all his life, got good at guitar ever since he had a synchronicity connection. I had a messed up, this is the last one I'll do, just because you reminded me of this, though, is when I was in Mexico years ago. I was with my brother, and we were on a spearfishing trip. And all of a sudden, he comes out of there's a shark in the water, and he gets bit by sharks, and there's blood, and people are screaming, and him and his friend dies. He lost his leg. Oh. And I'm like, oh my God, this is horrible. And for months after that, I'm like drinking and my life is falling apart. And I have these like hugely intense, like just horrible. It was just really bad, But then I was praying to God, like, please God, take this away from, if there's just any way you could just like make this not have happened. Just make this, Yeah, and I know but then I woke up in Mexico again, and all this stuff that had happened hadn't happened. And I did a lot of things that were not related to this, like dealing with courts and dealing with school and dealing with girlfriend. A lot of my life didn't happen anymore. And I just got up and I ran down to the beach, and there my brother and his friend were in the ocean. And I said, get the F out of the water, get out of the water. He started screaming. And he's like, what? I'm like, dude, I got a bad feeling. I'm your brother. Trust me. I didn't want to say shark or anything. Yeah. And he's like, yeah, I had to feel kind of weird too. I was feeling weird. Weren't you feeling weird? And so him and his friend got out of the water. And then after that, there was apparently a shark attack in, the beach, just the hotel next to it. There was a shark attack. So I don't know, man. But
interesting. And so what do you think there was, like a dream or?
I think it's a reality shift. I kind of started in my life. I'm starting to believe.
I mean, I'll tell you who that was a reality shift for. That poor sucker who ended up getting fucking eaten by that shark, who wouldn't have been
absolutely.
It's crazy that
I don't even know if they got killed.
Yeah, or whatever. But like, it's just interesting that like you're like, yeah, I saved my brother, but then like, yeah, that shark still went and ate somebody though.
Well, dude, I mean, and then I have a friend who got as soon as COVID was, they stopped quarantine for like after the first 6 months. They opened the beaches in Santa Cruz. One of my best friends, who's like a youth minister, he went out and he was killed by a shark. So I mean, there's weird stuff there. I don't know if it's synchronicity or
Wow.
Jung had a book called Synchronicity, Acausality, because it's not always about causality, but they're just things that match up.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's my paranormal.
Yeah, that is interesting. That one specifically. I figured you'd have some good ones. I feel like you know a lot about this shit.
I feel like you're holding back.
I'm not holding back. I wish
know
I
you
had
were abducted
stuff.
by aliens. You just don't want to tell us.
I wish.
These big gaps in your memory from when you did your. Yeah, I know.
Well, I said it at the beginning of the show where I'm like very pragmatic and practical. So even if unless something was so overt and blatant happening, I would never chalk that up to something like that can't be explained. I would always chalk it up. My brain just would say like, oh, that's because of something that can be explained, I guess,
Yeah, but even if something can be explained, it doesn't make it less mystical. Like, I feel like if you could understand the mechanisms behind you intuiting that someone is going to die or that someone's going to exist, that's a very powerful thing.
So
it's just we consider magic like a brand, it's like a trade secret, right? That's all it really is.
Yeah. But there's certain things where I go like, oh, that's a weird thing, but nothing like we had someone call in. They're like, ghost stories. Like, what are your thoughts on ghosts? Because you must know all about this shit.
Me? I mean, well, God. Okay. Like, first off, TV, radio, all that stuff was invented by people that used to do seances all the time because they had no TV. So that was what they did in the 19th century. It was the most popular thing. And I lived in a theater, an abandoned ghost town theater in Connecticut, in Norwalk, called the Norwalk Theater, that Houdini had played some of his last shows at. I think it was his very last show after his Canada trip. He'd come down. He's supposed to have a show and he died because he'd been punched in Canada.
Okay.
By the Quebecers, but
I remember that.
he used to try to stop. He would debunk paranormal activity a lot because he thought a lot of it was completely ridiculous. Whereas I think he did believe that there was, energy out there. And for me, the only time I ever really thought it had any logic to it is these guys who did the Chernobyl ghost hunt, and they went into Chernobyl and their batteries would just drain when they went into the school. Like, the desks would flip up and all the other goofy stuff. But the thing that got me was the batteries draining. Like, okay, in a place where there's an ample amount of energy that could hold some sort of a plasmoidal sp2 orbital, right? Because the sp2 orbitals are the things that are holding together the cohesion for symmetry.
I have no idea what you just said.
Like nanotechnology and everything, sp2 orbitals are these natural orbitals that exist, and they hold a certain amount. We want to call it gravity, but it's just magnetism. And so that allows things to pull together. And magnetism is a spin state. It's not really that there's magnetism in the world or gravity either. It's spin state, but that requires electricity and ion flow. So if there's enough ions, then something, that's what all these comic books are about. Like the Mr. Manhattan, he's zapped with enough electricity that can hold the symmetry. Probably not fully something that we can master, but the idea of light beings, if you're able to transfer your data to another body, you would do it through light instead of electricity.
Yes.
Or not pure electricity, because electricity would be like pulsating, but light has a spectrum, so you could have 8 times as much data at least throughout the spectrum of light. So I think that it's possible.
Okay.
But but ghosts in general, I think the idea that there are ghosts, it's like the same thing as saying there are different realities.
I guess I'm wondering what you think about the fact that people say like, oh, it's always like the same, or some ghost, and they see them in their basement or some shit, and it's an old lady.
I think black mold, on the most if you're looking for a practical answer first, black mold freaks people out and makes people crazy. And I know that that's a bigger thing than ghosts, and then that people should really try to get more black mold out of their house. But also the Croatians, the Slavs in general, India has similar all over the world. The idea in Japan, ghosts, demons, there's an association with this idea that a human that loses their humanity and becomes obsessed with their life's work or their passion or whatever, that thing outlasts them and can become a demon or like a ghost. It can be that can be the thing that embodies. And I think that that's a true thing. You go to a certain space, you can feel the energy. Maybe if you go into Walt Disney's office, maybe you can feel in there. I don't know.
Yeah.
But in terms of really crazy people, like, have you been to Alcatraz or any of these places?
I went to Alcatraz when I was a little kid. I was probably like 8, and I don't remember any sort of I remember going. I don't remember anything like.
And that's why you're scarred for life. See, you said this PTSD. You can't.
That's why. And I went down this path of comedy.
Comedy is drama in disguise, my friend.
Exactly. All right. That was Andreas. That was great, man. That was a very,
love you, dude. I'll talk to you soon.
Very interesting.
Come on my show soon.
I would love
get
to,
you back.
man. Anytime.
Let's do it again.
Anytime.
Love you. I'll set it up.
All right,
Peace.
Everybody.